Hey guys, it's 8 Deadly Sin coming at you with another Champion Select analysis for the EU LCS Day 2. This game is going to be the one between H2K and Origin. H2K probably one of my favorite teams to watch this split, especially just because every member on their team was kind of one of those, well, if they had a good team, then they would have been able to do good, and now they got that team and they're putting the performance out. Now, as a preface, I have not watched the VOD for this video as well. I do know who wins, but at the end of the day, I'm still impartial because I do not know how these team comps were executed. So let's jump right into bans and get with it. The first ban coming out from H2K is going to be Kindred. Again, a very solid jungle ban, especially if you don't want to play it, and I highly doubt Jankos probably wants to play it. In the sense that Kindred is very squishy yet can do a lot of damage, which is why it necessitates the ban. The scaling of AD from her passive is really good. The clear time is decent. Mobility in the jungle is good. Besides the squishiness factor, she's pretty much an ADC in the jungle, making her immensely powerful. And then, without even talking about the ultimate, is probably one of the most reasons why she's highly picked, highly valued as a top tier jungler. Her ulti essentially allows you to put a freeze on any team fight or engage that is happening, allows you to make everybody invulnerable once they get to a very low percentage of their life, and then everyone on the friendly Kindred team gets healed after the ult is done, allowing you to nuke down the remaining low members of anyone else on the team. Just kind of allows for a lot of dive prevention and kind of helps in those bottleneck fights and can give the edge to the other team. So a safe ban to get rid of. Now let's go to Origin's first ban. Second ban of the game is going to be Lulu. Again, if you've watched any of my other videos, Lulu is just so good right now on the patch, mostly because she was very strong up until the 30-minute mark, and seeing how most games now are not even getting past 30 minutes or barely into the 40-minute mark. Her bad period where she just becomes an alt bot at the end of the game really never happens. So all of her abilities yet early to mid game is super strong, making her a really good laner. She's a really good flex pick for both top and mid. Thunderlords makes her more viable in any lane because it pretty much guarantees a huge burst of damage that Lulu necessarily didn't have, because you're guaranteed to get the proc with pretty much the auto attacks and the whimsy. So very good, and not even to mention that she pretty much with her ultimate allows you to form many of these protect the whatever comps you want, and really just helps in mid game and turning fights. So sorry, excuse me. Rip headphone users, but that's kind of why she's really good right now. A good takeaway, especially coming from the red side where they're not going to be able to first pick it. The next ban coming out from H2K is Tom Kench. Tom Kench is in my top three of top tier top laners right now. Just so versatile, pretty much as I've been stating over and over again. He's the place of two frontliners in the sense that he has the gray health to completely regenerate and absorb even more and more damage, and the fact that he's just highly mobile. His ult has a lower cast time than teleport, has pretty much a similar effective range, and allows him to get into areas where teleport normally wouldn't let you get with the ward coverage and such, especially since green wards are eliminated, and with the extra teleport it just gives him so much global presence. He has the 3-stack Devour, which is very good in lane, but also very good at setting up ganks, setting up engages, and guaranteeing kills, as well as using that Devour on teammates to save the carries and protect them as well. So just a very strong laner and front line that's pretty safe to eliminate. Now going on to Origins, fourth ban again, the 100% pretty much red side ban of Gangplank. I think there's only been one game that I remember watching that was the first day of LCK where Gangplank was not banned on the red side, and anytime that it usually isn't banned on the red side, it's either banned by blue side or picked up, so it's near 100% in the statistics of being picked and banned here, and that's just because it does an insane amount of AD damage in an area effect with the barrels, also the global presence of the ult being able to help dives and negate dives with that, and also the damage that it does, and then just the general OP-ness of Gangplank right now is just that pure amount of damage you can do, getting the extra mobility from destroying the anchors, also the ability to cleanse CC with the scurvy, so it's just such a good champion, a really good takeaway, especially coming from red side. Next ban and final ban for H2K is going to be Morgana. Again, I kind of talked about this if you watched my other H2K analysis. It seems like this is more of a ban so no one really gets tilted, kind of looking like they're trying to eliminate any pocket picks. They don't want anyone being able to spell shield out of any of their magic damage, and they eventually take a really heavy magic damage and spell effect team, so that spell shield could really have saved some of the members on Origin if they ever get into hard positions. So honestly, it's just a really good solid pick. If they feel that they can fight and utilize the other top tier picks in the game, I think that that's good enough for them, so they don't really need to ban it. So seeing how this kind of signature H2K ban, especially from the two games that we've seen now, We really haven't seen why they have that fear, why they necessarily need that ban, but it's worked out for them now. I probably would have banned more of a Fiora or a Lissandra or something in that top tier of top lane rather than necessarily get rid of that lower tier support. Last ban of the game is going to be Zed from Origin. Now this is surprising just by itself coming out of champ select before anything is chosen. Obviously now we can kind of see why they banned it is they're going for a Rise comp, and if Rise is originally going in the mid lane or anywhere else, they don't want that assassin pressure in the early game to try to shut down Rise. Even Kassadin doesn't do too good against Zed as well. Honestly, it's a very weird ban for me. I would think they would rather ban Fiora or Lissandra rather than the Zed, not necessarily have to play the Rise. The ban works in the context of what they eventually draft, but by itself it doesn't make too much sense in my opinion. But ultimately, for the comp that they're going, this was the correct ban to choose. Now let's go into the picks. First pick is going to be Poppy for H2K. It's going to be Poppy support. Honestly, Poppy support is very good right now just because of the pure ham factor that Poppy brings to any bottom lane. Not only is she tanky, but she can also have great engage off the various structures in the bot lane, walls from the bush and such to land her E and get that stun, as well as the slight slow that her Q does with that damage. She has great in-lane poke, being able to trade with the buckler, just assists on any damage and trade that you're going to have in the bot lane. Her ultimate is a really good form of disengage, allowing you to knock back anybody, but also a good form of setup engage in the sense that if you cast it right next to you, it knocks them up immediately right above Poppy, allowing you to kind of set up a lot of damage and set up, kills for your team as support, as well as the ability to stop those dashes and dodges from with her W in that area while giving her movement speed. Just a very good, strong support in the meta right now in 6.1. The next drafting phase is going to be the first one for Origin. They're going to be picking up Lucian for Sven, and Amazing is going to be picking up Elise. Now, I really like the Lucian. Honestly, the only thing that I think would have been better than the Lucian is the Corki. I think Corki's stronger than Lucian just on a utility basis while also having the same amount of damage in a different way. But Lucian is probably the best in-lane ADC right now with the way he can bully and harass in the lane with Piercing Light, as well as the constant use of his auto attacks and pretty much a Piercing Light auto of his passive procs Thunder Lords and just causes a huge amount of burst damage, allowing him to bully lanes immensely. Honestly, number 2 on my top 3 list of top ADCs right now, and just an overall really strong pick, especially when blind picking. Now, going to the Elise, Elise is definitely in my top three top tier junglers of this patch as well. Elise just has so much gank ability in the sense that she can open up multiple gank paths with just the distance of repelling into the lane, and also the range of cocoon. And now since green wards are no longer available and there's less green warding unless you have a lot of trinkets or sight stones on the team, she's able to kind of come in from behind the lane, come in from the river and all these walls, and kind of open up a lot of the map, as well as applying a lot of early game pressure because she can do so much damage early game, especially with Thunder Lords. It just makes it a very good top tier jungle pick. Moving on to the next drafting phase, it's going to be H2K picking up Lee Sin for Jankos, and it's going to be Lissandra, which is going to be at this point a flex pick. We know it goes to Odoamne in the end, but at this point Origin doesn't know where that Lissandra is going. They probably can infer that it's going top, but again, still a flex pick nonetheless. We have seen some mid Lissandra this season already throughout the region. So let's talk about Lee Sin first. Lee Sin isn't my first choice for jungler here. Now I only say that because like whatever Lee Sin can do, there's usually a tankier version that can do it better with less damage, like a Zac or a Rek'Sai. Now, what I really like about Lee Sin means that they're going to be focusing for the early to mid game. That is when H2K wants to win this game, as evidenced by this Lee Sin pick, who's going to be doing massive amounts of damage from the early to mid game, especially with Thunder Lords early in that first 10 minutes. So I think Jankos is going to be looking to gank early, gank often, and gank hard, especially with Lissandra being able to set up that Lissandra and get her snowballing just allows her to have better team fight potential. So that transitions perfectly into Lissandra. Also, I think the matchup between Elise and Lee Sin is really good. Honestly, if I was going to describe early game damage of junglers, it would be Lee Sin would be the AD Elise in the sense that he has also greater mobility and greater gank ability with the lack of green wards and the poacher's knife, allowing him to combine the sight stone into his jungler item and use that to ward hop over various walls and set up more ganks, as well as just the early amount of damage he has mirrors somewhat the level of damage that Elise can put out early. Now let's talk about Lissandra. Lissandra, since it gets a flex pick, but let's talk about Lissandra Top right now. Lissandra Top, the difference between her and Fiora essentially is that while Lissandra scales a little bit worse into the late game, Lissandra is going to be the queen of mid-game team fighting with all the magic AoE damage that she can do, as well as the point-click CC and damage amplifying nature of her ult. So she's looking to get into those close quarter bottlenecks because she can get more AoE magic damage off, as well as being able to create picks with a Q to an ulting on an unsuspecting target, as well as all this magic damage that she can constantly pull out with her Q, with her E, and spamming that. And the Roa changes allow her to scale a bit better into the late game and get a little bit tanky, but she's really looking for that mid game, kind of already giving away the theme that H2K is going for, very strong early and mid game. And I'll get more to that when we analyze the full team comps. Now, moving on to the fourth phase, we're going to be picking up Rise, which eventually goes to SOAS, but is a flex pick where most people assume it goes mid. I would be assuming that it would go mid if I was H2K, and then we have a Braum picked up. Now, let's talk about Rise first. European Rises have been, I'm going to say, in general, very underwhelming. Now, don't take offense to that, just saying that, like, that means that the European LCS and the European players have definitely figured out how to counter Rise when his mid to early game mechanics aren't at the maximum level that you can play at. And that countering is choosing an aggressive laner who can put pressure on him in the early to early mid game section, kind of that first 15 minutes, set him behind long enough that he's never going to have the time to scale up, because by the time he'd be at full power with that delay already from the laning phase of him kind of getting shut out and destroyed there is going to be about 45 minutes, and no game's really going to get to 45 minutes on this patch unless you're playing against KT Rolster. So, it's not really going to get to the point where he is that effective, but it's still, just really, really good. If you have the ability to get him scaling up and get ahead in lane, then you can accelerate that process, making him a beast to the end of the early mid game. So about by 30 minutes at the minimum, you can have a very, very, very powerful Rise that does a massive amount of magic AoE damage, just constantly throwing out those rune prisms and such, and just doing an insane amount of damage. So a very good threat nonetheless. Also a flex pick in here. Let's talk about the Braum now. The Braum, I think, is probably one of the best supports here. I mean, honestly, there's no real other support that I think would mesh well, especially with the Lucian lane. Pretty much what I can see from the bottom lane of Origin coming out, they want to 2v2. They want to be lane dominant in that bottom lane. You have the great synergy between Lucian passive and the Braum passive, allowing to get those stacks rapidly and just do a massive amount of damage. And the damage from the Q and the passive is insane, but also the poke coupled with the poke damage that Lucian can put out with his piercing lights is going to be an insanely dominant and bully focused bot lane for Origin. So I wouldn't suspect any lane swap in this situation coming out and initiated by Origin, because they just have such a lane dominant. Also, the Braum is going to be able to block a lot of those Lee Sin Qs and some of the damage coming out from Lissandra. So it's kind of blocking that engage and kind of preventing that from reaching the back line, as well as the disengage of the Braum ult with the CC that applies of that slow is very, very good. So a solid support pickup. I wouldn't suggest an Alistar in this situation because it doesn't synergize well with the Lucian. I really wouldn't suggest the Thresh either, because I think the combination of Lucian and Braum is just so dominant in lane, trying to push an advantage just straight out of Champ Select coming from Origin. So I like that out of their draft so far. Now, let's move into the fifth drafting phase, which is going to be the last phase for H2K. They're going to be picking up the Corki for Forgiven, and they're going to be picking up LeBlanc for Ryu in the mid lane. Now, this is what I really like about H2K. I think they're really on top of what this meta is about. And what this meta is I view it as our goal is to win the game before 30 minutes meta. And I think that's how every professional team really should be playing this game. Game of League of Legends on 6.1, and maybe into the future, depending on how Riot changes the landscape of the game. But especially with death timers, this is a game where the goal is to win by 30 minutes. And I would predict with the team comp that H2K has constructed here that they will win by 30 minutes if they win this game. If they don't win this game, then something obviously went wrong. But if they win, I would put money on the fact that they win before 30 minutes. I don't know. I haven't watched the VOD yet. So let's get into the specific points. Corki is probably my number one top ADC of this meta so far on this patch 6.1, only because he just offers so much utility on top of his immense damage. Thunderlords makes his damage already go through the roof just like everybody else, but the magic damage combination with Thunderlords is insane. Then the Fast Bomb, his E, the Gatling gun, his Valkyrie, all of that can proc Thunderlords very fast, do rapid bursts of damage, and then ultimately his mixed magic damage poke is insane. That's why Corki's always been played, even in Season 5, before Thunderlords and before the package. But what really makes him number one is the package and how to utilize the package. Now, if you don't know, the package essentially gives Corki, when he picks it up, a huge mobility boost and the ability to pretty much cast a I would describe it as a Valkyrie that has a wider width, but also the length greater than the equalizer from Rumble. So it's essentially like a mini equalizer from Rumble, but that in the form of the Valkyrie from Corki, except he gets to use his Valkyrie after he utilizes it. So every time Forgiven picks up the package, I am expecting a kill somewhere on the map, because the package is just provides such great utility, especially with the lack of green wards that are going to be coming up just because of the vision changes. It gives him so much area to engage upon anything in any lane almost, especially coupled with the movement speed you get when picking up. So I think every time he picks the package, Forgiven is skilled enough to get a kill every time, and I think any player should be skilled enough to get a kill every time just because of how good the package is, and synergizing that with aggressive junglers and team play like Lissandra, like Lee Sin, having that aggressive, team fight oriented into the mid game. It just does insane damage, and that's why I think Corki's number one, and also why I see Forgiven playing a lot of Corki like he played yesterday, just because I think he understands how the bot lane meta is shaping up, specifically in his role of ADC, which is nice to see, where a lot of other teams, other than Korea, really aren't catching on to the fact that Corki is just so good, not only in damage, but the utility of the package is just amazing. Let's go into the LeBlanc pick for Rio. Rio, obviously a really good mid laner. Now, at this point, they do not know, and I would guess, and I would also assume that Ryze is going mid lane. So as I said, the way to counter Ryze that, the Europeans really have pioneered in the fact that it was showing its effectiveness is creating and the true and tested way to counter Rise is putting a lot of pressure on him in the early mid game. So I would describe that as like the first 10 minutes of this game, and really, shut him down before he even gets started, before it gives him time to scale up. And a perfect person to do this would be the LeBlanc. And as I said, Thunderlords is really amazing for a burst. It just makes LeBlanc's assassin potential so much greater. She's definitely going to be able to dominate in this lane and do a lot of damage, especially on a mechanically sound mid laner like Ryu. I think that this is the perfect choice to choose. I wouldn't really choose anything else, especially going in this team comp, in the sense that like a Victor wouldn't be good because it would take too long to be as much of a threat in the mid game as a LeBlanc. I don't really think a Kassadin would work out because that's more on the scaling side. I don't think um just trying to think of really strong mid laners right now. I really can't think of anyone that isn't an assassin. Even of the best assassins, LeBlanc is still the best in just terms of raw damage that she can output. So I think that this is the best team. I'm going to analyze the team comp as a whole after I finish talking about the last pick. The last pick was very, very, very confusing for me. I'm thinking Origins draft is really, really good right now. I'm thinking they got, at least a decent wave clear with the culling, but that's only really needs to be coupled with another form of wave clear. Otherwise, just Lucian as your sole wave clear is really bad, especially against this team, and I'll explain that why when I talk about the team comps. You have Rise that pretty much gives them the late game guaranteed win if executed correctly, especially in the mid lane. I think like the jungle pressure coming from Elise is very good. Also the utility of Braum, very good. Everything I've already talked about. And then I see this Kassadin, and I'm like, why? Why? First, Rise is less effective in the top lane because the long lane makes him take longer to get to lane and constantly farm, and if he utilizes his TP, no longer does he have TP pressure, and also if he's in the top lane with TP, he doesn't have that much pressure until he's been scaled up to actually do damage, so he's not that much of a threat in the top lane, and that kind of reduces his ability to scale faster just because of the time spent walking to lane is the time spent not stacking tier, not getting XP, and not getting gold from minions. So I don't really like top lane top lane Rise unless it's executed really good, especially against the semi-aggressive laner of Lissandra is going to be able to constantly push him into turret, really delaying the scaling even further. But when I looked at Kassadin, it's not even a wave clear mid laner. The Origin team has absolutely no wave clear coming out of this besides a Kassadin E and pretty much the culling. And you can say, well, you always say that Lucian's a really good wave clear ADC, and I say yes, he is a very good wave clear ADC, one coupled with another form of wave clear that gives him the ability to get up to the minion wave when he doesn't have the culling up to cast out the piercing lights. But every time Sven is going to be coming up to the mid lane, you're going to have poke coming in from Corki, poke coming in from Lissandra. You're going to have the danger of being straight out assassinated by Ryu on this LeBlanc, as well as being engaged on by the Poppy and the Lee Sin, so they're not going to be able to get up to these minion waves to clear them. And Kassadin is even worse because he's a melee going against LeBlanc. Sir, the Kassadin LeBlanc matchup is really good in the favor of Kassadin, but I think that Ryu can at least go even in the lane and still have a decent amount of kill pressure on Power of Evil, but then also has the ability to roam and try to get other lanes ahead. And I really don't think that the Rise v Lissandra is necessarily the best matchup that they want to do. Already explained that. So let's kind of analyze these team comps as a whole. You have H2K that I already described as the we want to win by 30 minutes team comp, and the reason it's that is because this is a team fighting skirmish comp if I have ever seen one in my entire life. The front line that they have is not your traditional tank front line. They have very much mixed tanks in the sense that by the mid game, Lissandra is going to be pretty tanky for the mid game because of Roa stacking health. Lee Sin is going to be decently tanky by the mid lane, but not insanely. And Poppy's going to be decently tanky for tanky standards of the pre 30-minute mid game kind of where we're at. So it's a front line that really only holds up and really disintegrates after 35 minutes, but they don't want to take that game this long. And then the team fight oriented that's come from it is Poppy goes ham and straight up runs in the team fights and initiates that. Lee Sin does the same. Lissandra does the same with all her AoE, point click target of her ult, as well as the, ability just to kind of rush in there and try to blow someone up. Corki is probably the best example of this because not only can he chunk them out with poking, but when he gets into these team fights, especially if he has the package up, he's going to be able to initiate fights and, pick people off and get this. Also, they have a decent amount of siege potential because they just have the wave clear of the Lissandra and the Corki, and then you have the assassination potential of LeBlanc, and as soon as LeBlanc gets rolling, she can pretty much snowball over, anybody in her path, especially during those pre-30 minutes. The Kassadin's going to be weak enough to blow up, the Lucian for sure is going to be weak enough to blow up, and if they, gank the Rise effectively and get him behind, he's going to be easy enough to blow up as well. And the other two threats of the Elise and Braum really aren't necessary targets to take out or priority targets to take out. So H2K has really crafted what I think would be the perfect picture of a meta team comp, meta skirmish comp that really wants to end this game before 30 minutes. Again, I haven't watched the game, but if H2K wins this game, I would bet money that they, ended it before 30 minutes just based on the type of team comp that they have here. And also you might be saying, well, they don't have a team that really looks like it would take objectives that fast. Well, you're going to have the Sheen proc from Corki, but you need to remember with 6.1, there's been changes to the armor on turrets allowing you to, with lower resists on pretty much every turret that exists, so you're able to snowball turret objectives very fast because there's not like an increased resistance or anything now. It's actually lower, so you don't really need a Tristana or anything like that to take those objectives now, and if you just win those team fights and are left alone at a turret with enough people, you can take them down relatively fast. So I'm really liking the team comp from H2K. Now let's look at Origin. The fatal flaw of this team comp, as I've already alluded to, is just there is no wave clear. And any wave clear that they have with Lucian piercing light and culling, as well as Rise being able to get up and do damage, and Kassadin E, all of those abilities are relatively short range, making and forcing them to get close to the minion wave. But at the point where they're going to be getting close to the minion wave, you're going to have Lissandra casting at them. You're going to have LeBlanc jumping in with distortion and her ult and doing a shit ton of damage. And you're also going to have Corki poking them out when they're trying to get up to the minion wave, giving the siege the siege ability in this game favored towards H2K, and they're pretty much not going to be able to wave clear. So if they fall behind in any lane, and H2K really puts the pressure there, they're not going to be able to wave clear effectively to counter siege well. And all their team is really banking off the late game. They really don't have any mid game threats besides the Lucian, and I guess you can half consider Ryze and Elise as like one mid game threat because Elise starts to begin to fall off, but still is relatively strong in the mid game. And Ryze, if played correctly and is able to scale up very fast, but since it's in the top lane, it's not going to be able to, is ultimately not going to be that huge mid-game threat. And Kassadin at that point is still in the process of scaling up, so while he's somewhat strong and is kind of mobile with his ultimate, the Rift Walks have a long cooldown, and he just doesn't have the inert damage, so I think that it's going to be a very tough job for Origin to be able to survive this early to mid-game, and if they somehow manage to survive, and they somehow manage to push past 30 minutes, I think by the 35-minute mark, I would give Origin the pretty much favor to win at that point if it gets that late, because I don't. The Lissandra falls off immensely late. The Lee Sin falls off late. The LeBlanc, while the damage will continue to increase, it doesn't really matter with the threats and CC that's on Origin's side. And the Corki, while it doesn't necessarily fall off, there's better late game options like a Lucian for just pure right click damage that Corki's not going to be able to do out. And Poppy's kind of going to lose her ham factor because her CC and engage really isn't going to matter at the point where they're just going to be able to brush that off and insta-killer with Ryze and Kassadin. So it's pretty much what I would put a factor on this game is it is late game versus mid game, H2K controlling the mid game and early game significantly, and that if they can get this Lissandra ahead in lane, but more specifically because there's the Ryze there, that's where I think Jankos should direct a majority of his ganks to shut down that Ryze, pretty much gutting the late game strategy or gutting the mid game defense factor that Origin will have. And then I think that he can also, Forgiven should be fine in the bot lane, while I would definitely favor Origin's bot lane just inherently because of the champions that they have. But if I had to give an advantage to any team to who's actually going to win, I would have to give it to H2K because I feel like they can close out this game before 30 minutes just based on the champions that they have, regardless on how it's executed or not, because I just think inherently from the kits and just scalability of their comps versus the late game focus of the Kassadin Ryze duo is just too much. Also, there's a lot of magic damage coming out from both teams, really more so for Origin, just because Braum does magic damage regardless if he isn't a damage carrier or not. Ryze does significant magic damage, Casson does significant magic damage, and so does Elise. So I think itemization is going to be fairly easy for H2K, while you have mixed damage of Corki, magic damage, but then the AD threat of Poppy, which really isn't much of a threat, but it's a decent amount of damage, especially in the mid game, and the AD threat of Lee Sin, who's going to be extremely strong in that early to mid game, kind of forcing more hybridization of defense itemization for Origin, while I think H2K can really just prioritize, some slight magic resist if they really want to even go a defensive route, and that's it. So I would give the slight advantage to H2K. Tell me in the comments who wins. I haven't had time to watch the VOD. I'm still making videos. I haven't decided if I'm going to do all the games today or just one more game for EU LCS. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Also give me suggestions of what you would want me to analyze or anything. I'm trying to get into actually getting into some gameplay, but the software that I have for making my videos isn't the greatest, if you haven't told by audio quality issues that I'm having trying to find that sweet spot for volume of voice, and the fact that I don't even have the proper video recording equipment. But it's fine. I hope you guys really liked it. This has been 8 Deadly Sin, and peace.